Hey, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. Thanks to HVAC School for letting us be here. My name's Don Gillis. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I've been with Chemours about 1.5 years. I was the senior technical trainer for Copeland for a handful of years, and I spent approximately 24, 25 years in a truck, and I'm still a licensed journeyman, and that's enough about me. Chris, you take it away.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. My name's Chris Pyles. I work for Chemours. I really only focus on XL41. I've been in air conditioning for about 15 years, mostly moving equipment, and then working for OEMs like Trane and Samsung with mini splits and VRF. So that's really kind of like where I've been living for the past while. But for the last couple of years, it's been pretty much focusing in on 454B. Let's see. Now, this information that I'm gonna take about 30 minutes or so to go over some stuff that you may have already seen on these other webinars, other podcasts that you've been through. But I'm gonna show it again, and I kind of want to make the point that this stuff is coming. It is coming. It's 2024. You're gonna start seeing this equipment coming out from the OEMs, and the impending thing that's gonna affect your lives is that you're gonna need to be able to explain this. You're gonna need to be able to talk intelligently to a customer. Because if you can't talk intelligently to a customer about A2Ls, Mr. and Mrs. Jones at the kitchen table or whatever, then what you're gonna talk about is what you're comfortable with. You're gonna talk about repairing their 410A system. So essentially, until you're comfortable talking about putting in an A2L system, your business is gonna go over towards the service and repair side of things, which may not be as much money for you guys. So really, this is coming. And I'm going to go through these slides. I'm going to kind of explain it a little bit, but understand that the point of my part really is to let you guys know that this is coming and you're going to need to be able to explain it. Okay? All right. Now, you guys have probably seen this before. There's two things. As far as the global environment goes, in the beginning, back in the 80s and 90s, we talked about ozone depletion, right? So the hole in the ozone. If y'all remember, I don't know if you do, right? Ronald Reagan was running around with skin cancer talking about a hole in the ozone. Right? So around the 80s and 90s is when we started really taking it seriously, and we switched from R22 into 410A because they came out, the UN came up with this the Montreal Protocol, right? And that's when they started talking about doing away with gases and refrigerants that have ozone depletion potential. That was going on then. We went away from R12, which had a 1, R22 had a 0.5, to a 410A, which had 0. That was the gold standard at that point, right? Well now, so since the 90s into like the 20-teens, science improved. And that's when scientists started noticing, oh, we've got this global warming thing going on. We got greenhouse gases. So you start hearing about greenhouse gases, turn of the century and into the 20-teens. So what happened in 2016 is they made a Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. This is all UN, this is all global stuff, okay? 197 countries signed the Kigali Amendment. They all said, oh, this sounds great, this is awesome. That doesn't mean that they made it a law in their country, that just means they really like the idea of the Kigali Amendment. So as far as the environmental and global issues that are going on, the Kigali Amendment is what's ushering in this new change from 410A, which has a GWP of over 2,000, to 454B and R32. Those are really the refrigerants that are coming in, right? And their GWP is much, much lower, okay? So globally, that's the environment over there. In the US, what the US did is they signed the AIM Act, and I know you guys have all heard about that. The AIM Act gave the EPA requirement to do 3 things, okay? Those 3 things are they needed to set up an allocation program. The allocation program, and we're going to talk about this stuff in the next couple slides, okay? Because I'd like you guys to see how it all works together. But this is regarding CO2 equivalent for people who make it, companies like us, like Chemours, like Honeywell, and people who bring it in, like Arkema, right? iGas, AGAS, all those guys. This ramp down, this allocation program is for us. It's not for y'all. Okay, what is going to impact you guys is the sector control limits that they came out with, right? They did their final rule back in October, and there was a little bit of mess about that, right? But we're looking pretty good on that now. I'm not going to get into that. We could spend a whole hour talking about just the technology transition rule, but essentially that's the second step that the EPA needed to deal with. And the third thing that's coming is a reclaim program, refrigerant management. And they had a proposed rule back in October when they released this. They went through a comment period, and right now they're reviewing all the comments that they got. Okay, so the AIM Act had 3 things in it, these 3 things here, and it looks like this. I'm going to put all these 3 things together, how it all works together. Okay? We're going to overlap those three things onto this slide. But up in this right-hand corner, yeah, upper right, we're going to see what do you guys need to know. Okay? So let's take a little bit about this. You guys have seen this. The biggest misconception that I have is that this is what's happening in 410A. Okay, that is not at all what's happening here. This ramp down, again, like I was saying, has to do with companies like Chemours, Honeywell, Arkema, Agas. This is the allocation ramp down that we have. It does not have anything to do with any one refrigerant and has nothing to do about the quantity. They're not saying, oh, you can't produce 1 million pounds of this stuff, you can only produce 900,000 pounds of that. That's not what they're saying. That's not what this is. It's all about CO2 equivalent. CO2 equivalent is if you have a GWP of 2,000 and you have 1 pound of that, you're selling 1 pound, your CO2 equivalent is 2,000. If you were selling 10 pounds of it, your CO2 equivalent would be 20,000, right? So CO2 equivalent is the weight times the GWP, and that's our allocation. We're given an allocation of like, call it 10 million, right? 10 million, and think of it like a bank account, right? So we have a bank account each year that gets loaded up with 10 million. In 2021, that bank account was 10 million. In 2022, the government knocked it down. So for us, our CO2 equivalent bank account is only 900,000, or you know what I mean? And then here, just in this year, they dropped it down another 30. What that does for us is it makes us choose what refrigerants we're going to go big on and what refrigerants we're gonna maybe phase down on, right? So like 404A has a GWP of 4,000. Maybe we don't sell as much 404A anymore. Now we go heavy on some of these lower GWP refrigerants, right? So all of this has to do with helping the manufacturers and importers of refrigerants make business decisions that support the AIM Act. Does that make sense? That's what this ramp down really, really is, if you look at this. Okay, I'm gonna lay this on top of it. Boom. Here's how the technology transition fits into it. Okay, if you look up at this screen, we're going from 100% with 410A, your GWP was 2,000. Now, just by switching refrigerants, the GWP drops down 78%. Okay, so really just this technology transition, and things like this, right, for commercial refrigeration or for whatever your ice skating rinks, the transition to new refrigerants is doing the heavy lifting for these two phase downs that we're seeing in the 2020s. Okay, that's how it fits in here. Now the next step as you get into the 2030s is going to be all about that reclaim program, right? Refrigerant management. Okay, so whatever you start hearing more about this, you're going to hear about it in like 2028, that kind of thing. But the refrigerant management is going to be a really big deal in the US moving forward because that takes us from this 30% down to this 15%, which is the goal. Okay, so that's how those three things are working together. If that makes sense, great. If you have questions about it, feel free to see us back over at the booth, okay? But that's basically how they all fit in. All right, moving on. The next thing you might need to explain to folks is what A2L means, where does it come from, that kind of a thing. A2L is a safety group, okay? That's what they call these, right? So you got A1s, you know, B3s, all that. These are all called safety groups. And the A2L, A means it's a lower toxicity, and 2L means, yeah, it's flammable, but it's got low flame propagation or mildly flammable, right? That's where it fits. So A2L is by ASHRAE 34. It's the ASHRAE 34 standard. And in there, ASHRAE rates it as A2L. That's the safety group. So why is an A2L, why are these new refrigerants flammable? It took me a little while to do the math on this one and figure it out, but essentially, what you're doing is you're taking this refrigerant that is not reactive in the atmosphere. It's not reactive. It's got a very high GWP because when you do vent it, right, someone shoots it with a shotgun, whatever, it vents into the atmosphere and it doesn't break down for over a decade, right? That just sits up there. Well, these new refrigerants, they react with the atmosphere, right? They react with the oxygen. Reacting with oxygen, a chemical reaction that you would have with oxygen, in some cases, if the temperature's right, is fire. So the new refrigerants, they break down the atmosphere much easier because they react with oxygen. Things that react with oxygen are flammable. So essentially, as you drop down in GWP, a lot of times you increase in flammability. Sometimes a lower GWP might keep you in A1, but after a certain amount of dropping down, you're going to slip up into a mildly flammable mixture. Okay, so in dropping down the GWP, you're now using gases that are more reactive to oxygen. Essentially, that's the path. All right, here's the fun stuff. Now, with a few of these next slides, feel free to take pictures, okay? Because it may help you explain to your other techs, may help you at the kitchen table, whatever it is. When you talk about flammability, there's this one test. It makes a lot of great pictures, okay? This is ASTM E681 test examples, and a laboratory can create this, can replicate this test in there, okay? You have this beaker, right? You fill it in with air on the top, and also whatever of the right amount of refrigerant. It's got a mixing device down here at the bottom, and it's got electrodes right in the middle. And what happens is, if a flame does get created, if you do have an ignition event, and the flame stays within this V, then it's considered an A1. Okay? Essentially, it's not flammable. It's so mild, it's not really an issue. Okay? If it does break out past the V, then it's flammable. And there you can start determining, is it a 2L, is it a 2, is it a 3, that kind of a thing. Okay, so in this test, the one right here, A1, this is 410A. So yeah, 410A ignites, right? Under the right temperatures, everything ignites. Okay, a 2L, I think this is 32 or it's 454B, I'm not sure. But this is how it looks when it burns. You can see that there's a little bit more energy in there, but enough to get it past that 90-degree mark. And so it's a 2L. It looks similar, but it's not really that big of a difference. Okay, now a 3, boom, it fills the whole jar, right? This is R290, this is propane. It looks like, I mean, to me, it always looks like a nuclear bomb going off, right? But it's just a little beaker about this big. So when it comes to flammability, there are differences in flammability, obviously, right? But this kind of gives a good example of what it looks like. We have a lot of guys who just take pictures of this and just show the guys pictures. So like, well, when it burns, it looks like this, it doesn't look like that kind of thing. All right, so I'm not a flammability expert, but these are basically the criteria for flammability, right? So how hot does it burn? How fast does it burn? How easily does it burn? That kind of thing. That's what this is going to address. If you guys want to take a picture of this, great, fabulous. Okay, we're going to talk about 454B, which is considered an A2L, and propane, which is an A3. This is just to give you some comparison, right? So lower flammability limit. Do you guys know what that means, the lower flammability limit? You guys heard this song and dance before? Okay, so it's the amount of refrigerant that's in the air. This right here says it's got, 454B requires 297 grams per cubic meter. What's a gram per cubic meter? What does that mean to me? That kind of thing. Basically, a cubic meter is about 40 inches by 40 inches by 40 inches. It's about a cubic yard, right? A little bit bigger. 297 grams is essentially 10.5 ounces. That's almost a full soda can. You would need to vent almost a full soda can in that cubic yard in order to even get a flame going. That's a lot of refrigerant. That's, you know what I mean, in that area. So if you were to imagine like an air handler cabinet, you go up into the attic, you open up the door, and it's got almost a soda can's worth of refrigerant in there, yeah, you might have an issue, right? But that's a lot of refrigerant in a small space. If you had a VRF system and you're worried about, well, what's going to go into the hotel room, you're talking about like a full 20-pound can venting into a hotel room, and you still wouldn't have enough in that room to have a flame. That's a lot of refrigerant. So when we take a look at grams per cubic meter, that's a lot of refrigerant. Now propane, on the other hand, 38 grams, if you do the math, right? That's about 1.5 ounces. It's a heavy shot glass. Huge difference. It's 8 times more refrigerant of 454B in order to get a flame. Okay, so lower flammability limit, you need a whole lot more material in order to even get a flame. When we talk about minimum ignition energy, this is millijoules, right? It took me a while to figure out what millijoules were. Essentially, a quarter of a millijoule, if you're in the wintertime and you're just rubbing your feet on the carpet, you got static electricity, that can ignite propane. Okay, you can do that with a gas grill at home, or that you can run experiments on that one, right? But you would need 100 to 300 millijoules to ignite an A2L. That's 400 to 1,200 times more energy in order to even get a flame going. If there's some reports out there, and I could talk about this stuff all day long, but essentially you need to achieve 700 degrees Celsius or higher. Okay, that's hot. That's hot as hell. So an open flame could do it, but not a spark, right? So I was going through someone's training for one of these major OEMs. Everyone's coming out with new training and stuff like that. They were saying roughly 60 amp spark. If you had a 5 horsepower motor and a 110 outlet and it arcs, that's about the size of spark you would need in order to light an A2L. So it's not going to be your power drill. It's not going to be pretty much everything that's in the cabinet. It might be the breaker that you have, but if you're not pulling 60 amps through there, you're probably not going to be able to ignite from there either. So it's a very huge spark. Burning velocity, this is the speed of the flame. Now propane, 46 centimeters per second. That's about 18 inches per second. Okay, 18 inches per second. If you took your hand and you moved it 18 inches, you can almost hear the propane, whoa, you know what I mean? Like coming out of your gas grill or whatever, that's a fast flame. Now, as opposed to an A2L, like 454B, 5 centimeters per second, that's about 2 inches per second. It's a very slow flame, okay? So the speed of the flame also comes in. It's a very slow, lazy flame. And then lastly, the heat of combustion, propane burns about 46, what is that? Kilojoules. Essentially, that's hot enough to ignite the material that hasn't already ignited, right? It keeps the flame going. Okay, the A2Ls burn at a quarter of that temperature. In a lot of circumstances, it's not hot enough to burn the unburnt, the unignited refrigerant. You know what I mean? So it's very hard. Maybe in a structure fire, you'll get a good sized flame going, but in regular circumstances, it doesn't burn as hot. It's kind of like trying to light masonite on fire, right? You can do it, but after a while, it's probably gonna burn itself out. It's not gonna keep burning like paper. This is a good one to take a picture of. We have some literature up here if you wanna pick it up afterwards. We have this table on the back of here. And this is going to be really good if you're talking to like engineers or anybody who wants to do some modeling, okay? And the reason it's a good one is because down here, if you have a refrigerant modeling software, you want to enter in some criteria. This is the criteria that we enter in, right? It's pretty common stuff. But essentially, this compares 454B to 410A if you have a heat pump, if it's in cooling mode or if it's in heat pump mode, okay? So this is a good one to kind of see. Now, as far as the refrigerant, the COP, I'm not wearing my glasses. The efficiency, now, here's a good one, okay? Out there in the world, a lot of times, manufacturers that we won't name like to say, oh, it's, this other refrigerant is far more efficient, so your equipment's gonna be far more efficient. That doesn't equate, okay? Here, when we're talking about efficiency, it's the efficiency of the refrigerant itself. It's not the efficiency of the equipment. Okay, so anytime you see in these refrigerant conversations, if we're talking about efficiency, that just means that the delta between the suction pressure and the discharge pressure is closer. Okay, so the compressor actually doesn't have to do as much work. Okay, so you're going to see the efficiency is a little bit more efficient, right, in both cases. There is glide, right? So 410A also has glide. But this new refrigerant also has glide, okay? Still, it's about 2 degrees. It's not a huge deal. Here's some of the fun stuff, but here's where we're starting to get into Don's world. These are the new cylinders. I don't know if you guys noticed, but they're kind of all around. If you were to open up the box and pull a jug out, it may not be a great idea, but you're going to see a couple things on there. The first thing you're going to see is you're going to see this gray body with a red band on the top. Essentially, that's going to be your indicator that's an A2L refrigerant, no matter what it is, right? So 32, this one. The next thing that you're going to see is you're going to notice that there's left-handed threading on there. Okay, the left-handed threading is kind of like a child-proof top on a medicine bottle, okay? It's actually kind of really appropriate because we're talking about children. We're talking about new techs who are just maybe out of school, they've been in there for a year, and you're sending them out on a job that maybe they're not trained for. They're going to get out to the field, they're going to pull out the jug, they're going to try and put refrigerant into the system, maybe top it off, a 410A system, and their gauges, their hoses aren't going to attach to the cylinder. This is a great chance for them to stop and call someone, say, hey, my hoses aren't working, my hoses aren't getting on this thing. Okay, are you dealing with a gray bottle with a red lid? Okay, what kind of system are you working on? It's an opportunity for them to stop and you guys to help them understand that they're dealing with an A2L. Okay, now because there's left-handed threading, I was talking to the field piece guys, they're going to start coming out with hoses that have left-handed threading on it, which is great. In the meantime, you're going to see a lot of these adapters, okay? And this adapter looks a lot like a mini split adapter, right? Mini splits, 5/16 to a quarter. This is going to be left-handed to right-handed for your gauges. So these are the CGA numbers if y'all need them. If y'all want to take a picture of it, that's great. CGA 164 is what these are going to look like. Talk to whoever your local distributor is, wherever you get your adapters now. If you do have one of these 90-pound cylinders, this is the CGA number that you're going to need, 670. It comes in 3 pieces. You can order it, that kind of thing. But this left-handed threading is going to be a part of A2Ls moving forward. Now, it's also only going to be on the cylinder. It's not going to be on any of the equipment. And the last thing, you're also going to see pressure relief valves instead of rupture discs. If you're in Phoenix and the van gets up to 200 degrees inside and the pressure gets built up underneath here, it's got a spring-loaded pressure relief valve, and it's only going to release the amount of refrigerant that it needs to get back under that certain pressure. Okay, it's not going to rupture and vent the whole contents into your van or anything like that. So you're going to see these are going to be the safety features on the new cylinders that are coming out. Are there any questions for me?
Yep.
Sir, in the white.
Yes, sir. On the CGA 670 based on the fact that you're using an adapter, will we need to change gauges? I heard you say that they're going to switch hoses and put the left hand. What about the gauges themselves on, our dials? Are they going to be different?
Sure. So I know Don loves to talk about this stuff.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. If you would hold that thought, I'm going to get into tools and all the truck stuff right now. But it's a great question. Hold that thought. I'm going to touch on here real quick, okay? Yep. Am I up now?
I think so.
All right.
That's
Thank
it.
you, buddy. Good job, Chris. Okay. Let's get into my section here. I don't know if I'm doing that right. There we go. 454B. We're going to talk about mostly, it's A2L stuff, but it's 454B versus 410A, because I knew this crowd. I travel about almost 40 weeks a year talking about A2Ls and did when I was with Emerson also, different refrigerants. So I just picked out what I thought would be interesting. First thing I'm going to tell you is there is no propane in A2L refrigerants. And I think I stole this from somebody, but you too can install A2L equipment and live to talk about it, okay? So I want to get that out of the way. And what I need from you is I need everybody to go tell 10 people, and then they'll tell 10 people, but that is the biggest misconception, whether I'm in Kentucky, Texas, or wherever I'm at. It's always the same thing. What'd you take away from it? Well, now I know there's no propane for it. So spread the word if you would. Seriously, true story. And I've been talking about A2Ls for 6 years myself. So how similar it is to you. So we're already past that hurdle of 410A. We were freaked out about R22. I know, like I said, I spent 24 years in a truck, and we were all freaked out about it. Like, I'm not buying that stuff. But this is how similar it is, and this is not smoking mirrors. This is factual stuff. I'm not a real good salesman. Similar pressure temperatures. You can see by the PT chart here what it looks like as far as the vapor and the liquid compared to similar thermodynamics. I'm going to actually get in the weeds a little bit more about that, what that looks like, because I've got a bunch of weird, senseless information in my head, but discharge temperatures mean a lot to me, pressures, temperatures, those kind of things. Similar material compatibility. What that means is it plays well with others. The 454B is made up of 70% of R32, which 50% of 410A is R32. The only reason R125 is in 410A for two reasons. R32 runs hot, okay? And so it has two things. It's a fire deterrent. You find it in fire extinguishers. And it also keeps that discharge line cool if you didn't know. And I'm going to show you some numbers here in a little bit, okay? Exact oil types. I used to say similar oil types. I thought, why am I saying similar? It's exact. They're both the same POE 32s, by the way, okay? Similar system architects, it's very similar. Obviously, when I say similar, I'm going to touch a little bit on compressor technology. I invited my friends from Copeland up to headquarters about 3 weeks ago. We had Heatcraft there and a bunch of them. So they taught me a little bit about some slight changes. I can't let all the good secrets out, but I'm going to touch a little bit on that, stuff like that. Now, obviously, TXVs are going to have different pressures because you're going to see different pressures when I show you what it compares to on 410A and R32, because I want to be transparent about it. You're going to see both of them. All the OEMs, by the way, I can't name names, but all the OEMs are going with 454B with the exception of everything that Daikin owns, and that's going to be 32. So your Manas, your Goodmans, and those kind of things. Again, I'm an educator at the first part of the day, at the end of the day, so I bring R32 in it because I want you to know everything, all right? All right, so I'm not a real good, I'm learning PowerPoint, so I'm not real pretty at this. I'm better with wrenches. But I chose just a number that I thought would be fairly around the ballpark of what comfort cooling looks like on the SST, or the suction saturation temperature. And what that looks like if you can't see it. So if in the same application, same situations, at 410A, if you were running about 117 on the low side on your evaporator, you'd see about a 39.4 evaporator temperature, okay? And then 454B, you'll be about 44.6, and then 32, you'll be about 38.3. So nothing really drastically changing there. I know years ago, we used to, I've been doing this for a little while anyways, so 33 years ago, we usually had like a 40-degree evap, and as Sears rose, we got a little warmer on our evaporator temperature. It creeped up a little closer to 45. All right, so the next thing, this is what I'm kind of geeky about this kind of stuff. So let's look at capacities. Capacities, as far as BTU, 410A, you'd be at 156, 152 for the 454B, and 171 for the 32. Coefficient performance on this one. This is important to the compressor world. The higher that number is, the more efficient it is. And basically, the coefficient is simply this. It's how much cooling capacity the evaporator is putting out compared to how much work the compressor is doing. It's simply a ratio, but it's very, very important for engineers or designers, okay? That's what the COP means, okay? Suction pressure, nothing really major here. Kind of, sort of, I guess, you know. 130 on the 410A side, 120 on the 454B. You're going to be about 133 on the R32, okay? The next one is your discharge pressure, obviously important. 429 on 410A. 454B would be around 390, and then R32 would be around 430. So you can see nothing drastic here right now, and again, if there was, I would tell you about it. Here's where something that is to keep an eye on here. So the discharge temperatures for 410A in the same application, 179, 191 for 454B, and then 215 for the R32. Now, I'm not slamming anything. I'm an educator, but we all know, I sat through Jeff's class yesterday, and for years, if you saw YouTube videos I made, I always said it's 225, stay alive. That 225, 6 inches out on any compressor. It doesn't matter who it is or what refrigerant you're using. It's all based on oil. You have to be careful with that, okay? Again, it's going to run a little hotter, 32. It's just by nature it does. What's that going to do on the next slide for us? Well, first of all, let's talk about glide, because that's a big misconception. Glide, half a degree in 410A. In the air conditioning world, we don't even really talk about glide, and that's got to do with your dew point or your subcooling or your bubble point, if you understand that. A 454B is going to be about 1.4. Don't hold me to that. It's less than 2 degrees. It's not going to be a factor. R32 is not going to have glide, because glide just simply means the different boiling points and whatever the components in are on that blend. So it's a single component, so there's not going to be a glide there. Molecular weight, I don't really want to get into that. It's not really that important in this conversation. Boiling points are, so you're going to be at minus 60 on 410A, 59.6 on 454B, and then 60.97. And here's where it changes a little bit. POE 32 for the 410A and 454B, again, because going back to that theme that R32 runs a little hotter, higher viscosity, just like motor engines, it's going to be a POE 46. So when you go to do replacements, you're going to have 3 different model numbers. I hate to muddy the water, but it's just a fact, right? Because now you're going to have 410A, you're going to have A2L 454B, and there's going to be, because that HFO in there, it's going to have to be careful with it. So there's a little bit of mechanical difference, and then 46 for the higher viscosity. So, and then at the end of the day, the reason the EPA is driving this, and they're driving it, it has nothing to do with chemical manufacturers, has nothing to do with compressor manufacturers, has nothing to do with HVAC school. It's just the way it is. We have to follow it, right? So when we talk about glide, I want to touch a little bit on glide. If you care, if you're ever on Jeopardy and you care, the weight of 454B is about 2.15. Why does that matter to you? We're going to have sensors in our equipment. I'm going to touch a little bit on mitigation strategies, even though I'm not from the manufacturers of the equipment. But to give you a visual for that, I taught CO2 for quite a few years. And if you look at, there's 3 states of a refrigerant: solid, liquid, vapor, right? So the solid for a CO2 is dry ice. And at Halloween, they'll put pieces of dry ice, moms and dads will, in the front of their bowl of warm water, and that vapor will look like fog, so it looks spooky and whatever. That's the vapor of CO2, and CO2 vapor is 1.52. So this is going to be heavier. So if CO2, the vapor there, is solid dry ice, is going to be about 18 inches or so, it's going to drop even more. So that'll play effect on where that sensor is going to be at, depending on which direction your equipment's going. And I'll show you more of that here in a little bit, okay? All right. I want to talk just a little bit about glide. I know it sounds corny, and all of you are a heck of a lot smarter than I am. I use this chart that's been around for years to kind of explain glide. And what this is a chart on evaporator and what BTUs means and all that good stuff like that. But what I want to show you is water. Water is actually a refrigerant, if you didn't know that. I've been talking about this for a long time. It has a number, it's R718. So good old water has a boiling point straight across 212. We all know that. Standard atmospheric pressure, 14.7, blah, 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 blah. Unless you're in Denver, Colorado, which I was, and I made sure I brought high altitude PT charts back the next time. But to water, you can see the straight line is the point I'm trying to make. That's what our evaporators look like with any refrigerant. We start out 75% liquid, 50% liquid, and then 25% liquid, and then we get into our superheat. And the only reason we have superheat is why? We don't want to hear crunchy noises in the compressor, right? We have to change state for the way it is, right? Okay, to reject the heat, we need that to go into a vapor, and we need the liquid to absorb the heat, right? Okay, so it sets me up for this slide. Again, I know it's a little sappy, but I want you to understand what glide means, because you're going to be hit with this. I've trained quite a few people. I train hundreds of people a week, and I'm getting people from different classes and stuff, and they're coming in, they're really concerned about glide in 454B. So I'm just an educator. There's no smoking mirrors here. So if we look at single components like R32 or water, good old R71A, it's a straight line. It boils at the same temperature. It has one boiling point, no other boiling points. There's also called an azeotropic blend, like 410A and 454B. It looks and acts like a duct, like the single components. It boils so closely, you don't take in consideration, okay? We all on the same page there? When you have a lot of glide, okay, a blend is anything with 2 components or more. When you have something, you can have as many as 4, 5, 6 components in a blend. And there's usually more glide there, okay? And the farther that glide is, the harder it is to work with, because then you're working in the midpoint. So the way this works is, if you care to know, is when you get into the big glides, pardon me, you'll get the first, let's say there's 5 of them there. The first boiling point is going to be the highest pressure or most volatile. And then it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it boils off and we're into vapor. That's what we're supposed to be designed for, okay? The last part of that boiling point, bring it all over, bring it down. The start to the finish, from the liquid to the vapor, is your glide, whether that's 6 degrees, 14 degrees, whatever. A good example I use in the classroom when I hand out PT charts so they can do their work with the younger students, what have you, is look at 407C. If you grab the wrong one in 407C, if you have a handout, now everything's digital, you'll see usually they're colored differently. One's red or one's black or blue or whatever to signify this is bubble and this is dew, right? Because if you grab the wrong one and you're doing subcooling, you grab dew point, you might either look really good or really bad, all right? Because there's like a 12-degree difference there. So that's enough about glide, just so we're all on the same page there, okay? All right. Next thing, so what does glide look like? Examples here. I just got things that you would need to know. Again, 454B, it's going to be a little over 1 degree, but less than 2. 407C, again, a great example for glide. Something, I use that because we all have probably used 407C in our R22 days, before Mo 99 and New 22 and all that stuff, okay? It's 12 degrees. 449, which is a replacement for 404A, about 7 degrees. And then obviously 134A is a single component. Like if you didn't know, also another fun fact, if you like to quiz your kids, I know some of you are instructors, if you see a capital letter behind the number, means that it's a blend. It automatically tells you it's a blend. If it's a small letter, like that 134R main, it just means it's a single component if you didn't know that, okay? And then 410A is near azeotropic, as I said earlier. Real quick on codes and standards. I'm not a codes and standards, so this is going to be very high level. We have, if you care to educate yourself more, which I would encourage people that are decision makers or educators to do that. I bought a copy of 15.2 about 4 months ago. You'll find all your latest, greatest A2L stuff in there. 15 is for commercial refrigeration, 15.2 is for residential, okay? So we'll look at this, UL 2-40 and 289 also, okay? So how does this work? On the application side, ASHRAE standard 15 is how it's installed. They write the book on how it's installed. That's you and me. What we're doing, we're taking that information and that goes into your codes and what have you, okay? ASHRAE standard 15.2 covers the residential side. In the middle is what Chris just talked about, standard 34, which is just basically how a refrigerant is defined as its toxicity and its flammable. It's either toxic or it's non-toxic or it's flammable, and then how flammable is it, right? There's different levels. The higher number that gets up there, the more flammable it is. Product design, UL, is the safety of how the stuff is made. When I say stuff, it could be the compressor, it could be the whole condenser, it could be all the equipment. Okay, they want to make sure it's safe. That's when you hear the word UL. When I worked at Copeland and my shock collar would go off every once in a while saying, hey, I should take a walk here, I'd go through the labs and they were always testing stuffing, 24 hours a day in the compressors, making sure it's safe, make sure it works, what it's doing. 2-40 covers air conditioning, heat pumps, dehumidifiers. 2-89, again, is commercial, okay? So 15 and 289 are going to be your commercial stuff, and then vice versa on 15 to 2-40, okay? Enough of that. Some of the things they're looking at that they just added to 240 and 289, the focus on this new equipment that you're going to be seeing is ignition preventions, requirement for ignition, sources of ignitions, piping, refrigerant charge limits, refrigerant detection, room size, okay? Again, I don't want to muddy the water because I don't want to scare you. I'm really here to remove fear-mongering more than anything. some of the service and training literature, manuals required to each unit, installation. Some of this stuff is best practices, has always been best practices. We've always been taught, leave the manual on the job site. That is never gonna be more important than today. I can trust me on that one there. You're gonna do a lot more documentation. I don't wanna scare you and say, I shouldn't have said a lot more, but you're gonna document things you probably were already documenting privately, but you're gonna do it inside the door of the condenser, all right? I'm gonna leave that one alone. Here's a snapshot, if you care, the latest and greatest that was just shared last week at AHR. So this is the adoption of codes inside the United States. If you wanna take a picture of this, this is really good information. You can get it on AHRI, but not this pretty. They've taken the time to color it here and look at the states. And I'll give you a real quick overlook on high level here. On the left-hand side is air conditioning, on the right-hand side, commercial refrigeration. Obviously, air conditioning's first, so it's being adopted quicker. The bright side, because I am the guy that's the glass is half full, when I was showing this over a year ago, there was probably 7 states that were just starting up, you know, right, Russ? Yeah, just starting up with saying we're gonna adopt it in some phase. We were sweating bullets, the whole industry was sweating bullets pretty much. Are we even gonna get this out in time? Okay, so that looks beautiful to a lot of people. I mean, what it's saying is here, if it's dark green, which most everything is, it means it's enabled in some shape or form. If the letter L is on there, it means it's in legislation, they just haven't put it in their code books yet. If it has a C, that's a great world to be in. It's enabled and it's already been in the code books. Like I'm under the IMC, is how I'm licensed. My oldest son is licensed, is a contractor too, and he's under the IMC, so it's actually in the code books already. And so on and so forth, just so you know. There's hope here, everything's looking good, we're right on track now, or pretty darn close. What's not changing? Currently, I wanna make this clear, there are no requirements for any testing or any special cards required now for A2L. Will that change? I don't know, could be. It's up for discussion right now with the EPA, so stay tuned. I heard the ESCO guys that are next to us talking about it. We're very good friends with them, and we're all waiting to see. They took some input, so stay tuned right now on that, and I'm gonna leave it at that. What's not changing here? Safety, PPE, pretty common sense here. Not a lot's changing in what you're doing, what you're wearing, and those kind of things. If you're already doing the right thing, you're still gonna do the right thing. If you're using bad habits before and you carry that over into the next generation of refrigerants, you may get in trouble. I'm just being honest with you, okay? But again, don't fear it. There's nothing to fear here. Personally, I'm gonna go on the record to tell you, and I mean this sincerely, going through the 22 transition to 410A, I think now knowing what I know, because I've been talking about A2Ls for at least 6 years now with Emerson, okay, is I believe this is an easier transition because we're already used to those pressures and stuff. The difference thing is here it's a smaller runway. We're getting there a lot quicker. That's really the biggest difference. And yeah, they're flammable, but they had to make a new classification to even classify it. It was so close to an A1, they couldn't even classify it as an A2 because it would be misleading. You know what I mean? It's like the A2s, A2Ls between A2s, for example, it's a great fine line there. Anything A2L that way has to be faster than flame speed, pardon me, faster than 10 centimeters per second. Anything below that, 2L, 1, whatever, is less than 10 centimeters per second. And A2Ls are 454B is 5.2. I mean, it's pretty slow, right? It's not gonna, don't fear it, okay? Seriously, I'm being honest with you, all right? What's not changing? The refrigerant cycle's not changing. Now, obviously, again, like I said, TXVs are gonna be changed. The pressure's gonna be different on 454B and anything else, 32, but that's not different. You know what I mean? Anytime we change new refrigerants, we change, TXVs change, right? You have to match that up. So we're still gonna reject, we're still gonna absorb, subcooling's still gonna be subcooling. And the only reason I put this in here is because inevitably, wherever I go, questions like this arise. And I thought, you know what, that's not a silly question, So, A2L refrigerant installation on new equipment best practices. Some of this stuff, I know I'm preaching to the choir. First and foremost, A2L refrigerants, even though I just showed you how similar they were, A2L refrigerant will not be able to be put in existing equipment, period, okay? Now, you're probably thinking, hey, Don, who's gonna police that? It's like we used to say with Freon. Who's gonna police that I'm venting it? I don't know. You may not get caught. It's not worth your liability. It's not worth your company, your family, or anything like that. Don't do it. Somebody asked us earlier, is there retrofit kits out there? As of right now, no. Will that change? I don't know. Possibly it could, but I'm being told no. So stay tuned on that. In a year from now, who knows, but right now there's none. All right, so just stay tuned on it. Again, I'm not trying to muddy the water. I want you to understand. I'm just sharing what I already know, all right? Okay. Safety first, as always. Read the OEM equipment manual, read the manual. I wore Brian Orr, HVAC School's t-shirt, read the manual yesterday on my t-shirt. I love that shirt. Follow lockout, tagout procedures when needed. I know, again, that I'm preaching the choir, and I don't want to stand up here behind a podium or something and act like how great thou art. Trust me, I've done a lot of silly things in my life, so I am not perfect by no means. I'm just sharing you with what we're saying to do, what the industry's telling. This isn't from Chemours. Verify no low voltage is present before working. Ensure the area is well ventilated. And that's almost anything. I mean, anything with enough parts per million will asphyxiate you, right? Even CO2, by the way. It's 15,000 parts per million. So you have to stay ventilated, okay? Evaluate the work area for these things: ignition sources, flammable vapors, confined spaces. And if there's something should happen, like in a big industrial job with A2Ls, okay, the exit, you know what I mean? A lot of this, again, is really safety stuff. When you work on big job sites like I did at the end of my career, you have to follow those rules, you know? You have to wear your hard hats. You have to do the right thing, right? Okay, at this time, they recommend to have 10-foot work perimeter if you're working on like a residential system. It's not required. If you want to check those facts, I even put the information down there where you can find that. It's in UL 2-40, okay? It hints there that we recommend, not required, a 10-foot radius. So what does that look like to you and I? I don't think you need to get out there with orange cones in Mrs. Jones' house and start raping the area, but that's the visual. I usually use the analogy. Think of the utility companies working on a corner. They do it every day. You know, they rope off an area. It's safe right here, right? Okay, A2L installations continued. The minimum, again, the only reason I'm showing this is what's going to come in all the manuals for you. All right, now it's not going to be, the math isn't already going to be figured out for you, but the math has been done here for you on 454B. I show this because I'm hearing people already say, you mean I got to go in there and measure the whole room and the whole house out to see if I can put the furnace in? That's what they're thinking, but I'm a contractor and I know, so I'm going to try to take the fear out of that. Here's an example. This is square footage of a home. I want to repeat that. This is square footage of a home. If you have a home, a whole home, that's 59 square foot, which would be like a shed, okay, you can have 4 pounds of charge in that system. Does that make sense to you? I want to clarify that, okay? I'm not even trying to make you laugh, but I want to make sure, because I've seen people go, oh, I got to measure off this basement, I got to do this, and I got to do that, and now I can't put it in a closet or a small mechanic. It's just simply not true, okay? So I want to be clear about that. Again, if the square footage of the whole home is 74 square feet, you can use as much as 5 pounds of things. So I just want to make that clear for you, and I'll share these with anybody, the PDF, okay? But the math has already been done for you, all right? Okay. Next, I'm not going to do that one. It's a reading chart. If you did a lot of new construction like I did in the early years, back when I was much thinner and stronger and carrying stuff around, I've been using striker plates since day one. Does anyone else use striker plates or nail plates? They're common with the IMC in my code books. When they come and inspect stuff on my job sites or anybody I know, you have to have those. Plumbers use them a lot so you don't drill a hole or a screw or a nail or whoever, the homeowner, the building owner down the road. They hit that, it bends, they know there's something there, they just don't know what it is. So moving forward on those job sites, it'll be required. And in the 1.5 inches has always been the rule underneath the code books if you don't know that. If you're out somewhere where you don't understand codes, then that, but that's gonna be in that, and if you wanna know where that's at, that's in 15.2 also, and it talks about 1.5 inches away from the wall and the thickness of the gauge of the plate. They sell them in wholesales everywhere. I mean, I've never not used them when I needed to because I wouldn't pass my inspections, right? The same thing is gonna go for ASHRAE 15.2. They talk about certain things. Most of this is common sense, what we're already doing with A1s. The thing I do wanna point out to you is the 60-minute hold on your time, on your pressure of your thing, because those are things as I move forward that I'm gonna show you where you're gonna put that information in for the OEM stuff, that you're gonna have to document that. Now again, I know you're thinking, who's gonna police me on that? I don't know, but just do the right thing, okay? You're gonna have a place to document it on the equipment. Never exceed manufacturers. The system shall show no loss. Pretty much common sense on that. Record the pressure and date on the equipment label. That is in 2-40, just so you don't think I'm just pulling that out of the sky, okay? It states that right there. You have to do that, all right? Oh, I put fancy boxes in there and I didn't even know it. Only tools rated for A2L refrigerants moving forward. They've been out for almost 2 years. Does it mean you need to throw everything away that you had 2 years ago? Absolutely not. Okay, and I know I've had a lot of conversation with this with a lot of people in the room and stuff like that. It doesn't mean, here's what I'm saying about that. everyone that makes any kind of tools, or ESCO, or us, or anyone, or AH or I, have an A2L button on their websites. You simply hit that A2L button and it will show you the model number. Unlike new cars, they don't make new recovery machines every year, okay? So this year's model was probably the new one 5, 6 years ago, am I right? It is, it's a true story, okay? So they pressure test these things. I talked to many manufacturers. I'm not gonna drop names because I'll inevitably miss one of them, but they're pressurizing these recovery machines, let's say, beyond what they know the seals and the O-rings are gonna take with A2L gas, and nothing's happened. If you go to modify that or don't use OEM parts, then it's all bets are off, okay? But that's how it sits right now, all right? So A2Ls, A2Ls. This is your first glimpse at that sticker I'm talking about that's either gonna come in a packet or be already put on the door. You need to date that, what you did the vacuum on, okay? I throw up there about 45 minutes. Always check with your local jurisdiction, okay? But that's typically what people want you to do. Recorded on the label, that's in 2-40. This is required, okay? All right? You will put the date in there, you'll put the pressure test, what you pressured that for the 60 minutes, what it held at, and you also put your vacuum on there, what that was, okay? Everybody with me on that? Again, I'm just the messenger. Go ahead, you got it? Okay. All right, charges, that's what it looks like. You got an M1, M2, M3. Just like flammability, the higher the number, the more severity, okay? If you have an M1 category, this is mitigation strategies, which means if something should go awry, how are we gonna put it out? You know, how are we gonna do that? So mitigation strategy. If you have 3.9 pounds or less, nothing's changing in the equipment, okay? 3.9 pounds or less, it's the same as we've always done. If you get into M2, which is the world that most of you in this room live in, okay, you're gonna need some kind of strategy, all right? And I'll show you what that looks like in the next slide or two. M3 is not really gonna be the world we live in, but I'll talk about on the next slide what that strategy is. We've been working with all the OEMs behind the scenes. They've been kind enough in the last few months, now that the dealer manuals are going out, the installation stuff, after the webinars, they've been kind enough to share pictures with me and others about what some of their equipment. I'm not gonna drop names, I'm just gonna give you some visuals on that. So what does that look like? Here's one design OEM, all right? So at the very least, you're gonna have a sensor by the evaporator coil. This will be the start of most everything you see, okay? And some of the OEMs are gonna install that for you, and there's some OEMs are gonna have a place on the other side of the coil that you might have to move that, depending on the direction of the airflow. If you lay it horizontal, or it's an air handler, or it's a furnace, you know how that goes. One's going different directions, you understand that, right? So the way that's gonna work is, it's gonna send a message down to the mitigation board. The furnaces that are going out right now, that are designed for A1, already have a Molex plug on them, from what I'm being told. My friends are telling me this, that already shows a Molex plug that's already lined up that says mitigation connection. So they're already there, so they're getting ahead of the game, okay? So that will send a message down to the mitigation board, what we always call the circuit board. Some OEMs might have a second board, like a little mitigation board, like we did when we used to set our CFMs and stuff, the toggle switches for motors and stuff. So some might have a smaller one. So I can't speak for all of them. I'm just giving you a visual what you might see, or what you will definitely see, depending on who you buy from. It's gonna go down, it's gonna shut the system off, or the unit outside off. It's gonna activate G, which is fan in our world, right? It's gonna start moving that refrigerant out of there. And in the code books, it says anything greater than 25% or above, okay, the sensor will have to go off. And I'll show you some of the things that are written there, but it's kind of an eye chart. Most of the OEMs that I've been talking with, seems like that magical number is right around 20%. Whether that's here or there, it doesn't really matter. It's gonna sense that, it's gonna go off. The idea is to turn the air on, it's gonna blow through the ductwork, it's gonna move all that stuff out, the concentration, that's dissipate, that's what it's doing, right? It's dissipating it, clearing it out. And a lot of times I'll get somebody to show up, well, you're telling me they're gonna put A2Ls in my house? Chris showed you how closely they resemble with A1. If you're not starting fire now, and I'm being honest with you, nothing's gonna change. I don't want you to worry about this, because I'm being serious, okay? I have family and good friends in the field, and a lot of them are here today, okay? So don't fear it, it's okay. We're a tough industry. We can do this, all right? This is some of that stuff I was just talking about. It's an eye chart. Again, some of the criteria for these things that the OEMs had to do. This is out of 15.2. The refrigeration detection system shall comply with the following. Use a non-adjustable set point in initiating the mitigation actions. Again, some are going to say 20%, some are going to say 15%, but it has to be, right here, it's in writing. If it's less than 25 LFL, blah, blah, blah. If it's over 25 LFL, what that testing looks like. One of them's going to be 15 seconds, one of them's going to be 10 seconds, and so on and so forth. Just know that it's going to go off, activate G. Going to run for about 15 minutes. Don't hold me to that, but that's what I'm hearing for the most part, and then it's going to come back on in normal operation, okay? And in my opinion, I'm going to use the term 3 strikes, you're out, like a hard lockout, like we've done for years with furnaces and what have you. It's going to go back doing 3 times. If it comes out, it knows it's not a nuisance call, and then it's going to shut it down, okay? Is everybody with me on that? All right? So, if you get into larger systems, much larger than a residential unit, you may see some different mitigation strategies. That equipment's not out yet. You know, so you might see a solenoid valve. Everybody understands what a solenoid valve is. It's either open or closed. So it may shut down and take all the refrigerant outside the building, depending on how that building's being used. Okay, that's part of the mitigation strategy. Is it mercantile? Is there people in the building? Yada, yada, yada. That next second icon just means blow air. Do we have to bring air in the building? Do we have to remove air out of the building? And a lot of other things. And then our alarm system, okay? But again, that equipment isn't out yet. Just know that that could be possibilities on larger charge systems. All right? Here's some examples of the decals. I took this right out of a webinar I did with one of the OEMs. This is what they're sending out. You're going to see new labels. Notice that charging label. If you're adding more charge to the system, you're going to document that right on the job site. If you're adding, if you're doing your vacuum pumps and pressure test, again, that's all going to be added into it. So you're going to document it a little bit more on the job site. If I do the job and you didn't like me, you didn't like Don's Heating and Air, and you hired Chris's Mechanical, you got to leave that information for the following person, okay? It's just got to be there. It's just good practice. It's always been good practice, really, as far as manuals and stuff. Some of the things you may not already know about, this is another OEM, but I'm letting out top secret stuff because it's went public in their manuals now, or their dealer manuals if you haven't seen them yet. Contactors are going with a close, even though it's really hard, as Chris said, for the spark and stuff like that. So, and again, haven't we already had those? Haven't we seen those before with bugs and things? It's really no different there. And if you like pushing that little contactor button like I do too, the first thing you do when you go up there, hit your contactor with your nut driver, there's going to be a little hole there that you can still do that, okay? So they're not taking that away from you, but that's there. Notice the red cap over here. Required to have red caps on the equipment, okay, on the service ports. So you see red caps when you walk up to the A2L equipment, all right? Okay? And then the other thing, the last one, which I thought was kind of unique, not required, but they're using like a special kind of a snake skin around the Molex plug of coming from the compressor. And it's got little air pockets in it, and it's just prevention. Honestly, a lot of this isn't even, some of this isn't even required. It's all about liability. Just like Chris showed you on the tank stuff, some of that was enforced, but not everything you see, okay? There's liability in the game. We just live in that kind of world. Unfortunately, that's what people have to do, all right? This is a close-up from another OEM. Obviously, this is a heat pump. I don't know if you can see something else that's different in that has nothing to do with A2Ls. My son just bought one not long ago, shot me a picture. Hey, Dad, look at this. Cost me $6,000. He was so proud of it. They're going with straight pipes on there instead of bell fittings or females on your equipment. So, because that compressed tool is getting really popular, Zoom lock and those kind of things. I shouldn't have said a name, but you know what I'm saying? So if you're one of those people that like to start out and do it all the way through the job, now you don't have to braze that first fitting. So if you do like to braze, like I like to braze, throw your coupling on there, your female coupling, and go away instead of like a street fitting, okay? So that's new, and that's, from what I've seen so far, almost everybody's going to that. I haven't spoke to anybody that's not. Okay, so if you see something differently, I do apologize, all right? But the takeaway here is the red caps, all right? When you walk, and does anybody work with propane by chance? So they've been doing that for a long time with propane too. They got the red sleeves on there where they pierce the piercing valve. So red is an indicator you're working with something different, okay? All right, now this came from Copeland about 3 weeks ago. Hopefully they don't, I know Joe doesn't, he sent me his presentation. A couple things, only because I said, hey, it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, 410A, 454B. Because of some of the HFO molecules, what we found out, or what Joe shared with us is they're changing some things on some of the material with the high HFO content refrigerant. It's more susceptible to oil wash, okay? And that's what they do all around the clock. 24 hours, they're just testing compressors. Cold, hot, let's throw some junk in there and see what happens and all this good stuff. Okay, so just be aware of that. if you go to change one for the other, just be careful there, okay? There is a difference there, and I'm not saying that's going to happen in a day or whatever it is, but it's happening, so I want to make you aware of it. Electronics, some of the stuff that they do here, obviously contactors, variable speed drives, system controllers, all of that in the same space, potential leaks, new considerations, those kind of things, all right? And again, you'll see the service port here on this valve has the red dot on it, okay? So when you walk up to a system, when this stuff starts hitting the ground in the job site, you're gonna know a lot more about it than I am, but just know that red dot, hey, that fat guy from Ohio said that means it's an A2L, okay? So you'll know. All right, service and replacing equipment. Let's look at that. We're gonna go into recovery. We gotta recover first, right? You always use your PPE like that. The A2L recovery tanks will have a red stripe on them. As of 2 days ago, I would have told you I thought they were going with left-handed threads. But through a conversation with a friend of mine talking the other day, she told me from Hudson that she just came from a meeting from a very reliable source and says it looks like they're not going left-handed thread. So stay tuned on that. Definitely be a red stripe on the recovery tank for sure. She was convinced of that, okay? Again, that 10-foot work radius recommended. Obviously never vent refrigerant, I think that's a given. All tools should be rated for A2Ls. Really want to pound that out, okay? All right, just A2Ls, it's everywhere. Look around the booths, it's all out there, okay? Hand tools are pretty much going to stay the same, and recover all refrigerant when beginning the system. Use A2L recover cylinders, as I said, and do not exceed cylinder weights. Well, again, label and recover cylinders. 8 of those 10 things that are up there, or how many of there is up there, is already stuff we're doing, right? No change, it's not a big deal. I often say when I get to Tallahassee or Austin, if you came here for a big wow factor, you're probably gonna be disappointed. But some of it's good. I mean, most of it's good, but you don't know what you don't know, right? Okay, HR Safe Refrigerant Task Force, okay? This is on their website. I even made a QR code for you. Always follow manufacturer literature. Required, use inert gas to remove any residual refrigerant. It's always been good practice, by the way. And what they mean by that is not brazing with nitrogen. When you cut, did you see Chris show you A1 flame? It's flammable, okay? We don't think about it as flammable, but you saw the A2L just go barely over that 90 degree. That's that template they've used for years. If you go to braze something and it's open, or get a flame around that, you see that little bit of flame that comes out of there? I know we all think that's just oil. That's not just oil. That's a residual refrigerant in there. So now it's going to be required, okay, required, and I'm going to show you where it's stated at, for you to run some nitrogen through there to remove the residual oil. And if you didn't know, that's always been good practice. Now, for me to sit up here and say I've done that every time, I'd be a big liar to you, okay? But they're going to require that now, okay? All right. Ensure equipment is grounded. Use proper capacity discharge method. All right? Use OEM approved A2L replacement parts. Install a new liquid line filter dryer. Use nitrogen before and during brazing. Obviously, that's the POE problem there. And someone talked about oxidation yesterday. I think it was Jeff in his class. Recharge system will weigh in charge. And document information inside the equipment door. That's a big one. Please, please, please take that to heart. If you're the person in your thing, like I was a service manager for 8.5 years for a very high volume place, I was the person that tried to share information with others. Take that information back and let them know, hey guys, I hate to be the burden of bad news here, but sounds like we're gonna have to start doing a little more documenting on the job site. No big deal. Takes about a second, okay? Always leave the literature. A little bit about the liquid line filter dryers here. Always change them out when the system's open. Any kind of pressure drop. Jeff touched on this a little bit yesterday from Copeland. 2 or 3 pounds, somewhere there, moisture. The reason I put the side glass in there, we're not waiting for it to be wet, are we? When it goes into caution, change it then, okay? It's getting bad. You don't wait for it to get wet, right? And that's typically, you don't have to replace the side glass if you're using that one, okay? Liquid line filter dryers to remove moisture or try to help with that, okay? All right. The next thing real quick, again, I know it's busy, but here's what I want to tell you. On the calculations, nothing's really changing. Don't exceed the maximum allowed refrigerant charge. The condenser typically, from my experience, tell me if I'm wrong, typically comes with about 15 foot of charge on residential systems, and then you do your math, right? And that 15 foot is taking in the A coil or your evaporator coil into consideration too, if you didn't know that. And then you do your math. And there's 3 things you need to do your math with are simply this. You need the line size, obviously, you need the line length, and then you need the density of the refrigerant. That's that graph in the center that you can't read. Those are the densities of the 454 series, A, B, and C. A and C are refrigeration, B is going to be your comfort cooling. Record on the unit label the date, the total charge weight, and always refer to manufacturer's manual. That's in 2-40. Okay, so I'm not making this up. I know, like me, when I was a service guy or whatever, I didn't go read these documents. I'm sharing knowledge to hopefully make it an easier transition for you, okay? That's what the charging labels are gonna look like. I found that little cool app right there that does all the work for you. Literally, you put the refrigerant in, you put the length of the thing, the size of the line set in there, and it tells you exactly what to add. I thought that was, and you probably already know that. But I'm a big app person, I love that kind of stuff. Always use best practice. I'm gonna kind of blow through these only because, to me, most of it's common sense, okay? Airflow, airflow, airflow. Anyone have a problem with airflow ever? Yeah? Okay. Airflow, I'm a big adamant of airflow. Did I mention airflow? Label match everything with A2Ls, okay? And then keep literature with indoor equipment. I think I mentioned that like 3 times. This is something I saw when I was traveling with Copeland about 6 or 7 years ago. I have no affiliation with them like I used to say when I was there, but they've been around for years, but this thing's pretty cool, and now everybody makes them, all right? You put that on your tank of gas, and instead of using our calibrated wrist, when we need to top something off and then shut it down and wait 15 minutes for it to stabilize and then you go, oh shoot, it overshot it. This thing trickles it in real slow on the scale. I mean, really, really slow, and you can stop it on a dime. And I see some heads nod, so obviously, when I first started showing that in the classroom, wholesalers in the back of the room, the salespeople going, is that in our catalog? And I'm not even joking, you know? But and I'm not affiliated with it, I just like to share information that I think is very valuable, okay? Quick review on what we talked about. Safely remove refrigerant following local codes, required. Purge circuit with inert gas, always was best practices. Now it's gonna be required. Remove the residual refrigerant. Evacuate the circuit. I can't imagine anyone not evacuate a circuit, but I guess people do it. I didn't know that, but now it's gonna be required. You're gonna document that. Open the circuit by cutting or brazing, okay? I'm a big fan of cutting things out, whether it's a liquid line filter dryer or it's a compressor. I know it's easier to sweat things in. I totally get that. But, you know, as I used to say at Copeland all the time, and Jeff should nod in his head, a liquid line filter dryer, the job of it is to help that moisture get out of there, right? When you sweat those things out, you're chasing the moisture back in the system, only to be caught again by the new one you're putting in. So it's kind of silly what we're doing. And now I see liquid line filter dryers actually coming with a stub longer where it works about better. Okay, it's good to see smiles in the audience on that because that wasn't all commonly known all that long ago. Leak and pressure test, as I said, best practices before, at least in the world I lived in with the code book, now it's gonna be required. Evacuate the system and then charge the system, okay? Just because I know you don't think I'm misleading you, but just to let you know that little fancy spreadsheet that I just showed you in color and that really pretty thing, this is where it's pulled from. That is right out of the 2-40 4th edition, which is what we'll guide by. See the words required there? That is real world, okay? So who's gonna police that? If you're under codes already like I am, you're gonna see it right away, okay? They're getting educated right now. We're working with fire departments and everybody right now. Colleges, I've already done a class at Alabama University with their maintenance staff. The next day I went to Auburn. I wasn't allowed to tell each one of them that I was there. I guess there's a big argument with them. I'm joking. I know there's an argument with them. I'm going to Penn State in about a month or so, so everybody's moving right now on this, okay? Get your training. Service trucks, let's talk about service truck. Service trucks in the Department of Transportation, or DOT, pardon me, under the materials of trade, it's business as usual. Don, what do you mean by that? It's the same restrictions in place as it was before. There's always been a limit on 440 pounds in your truck. That's your settling, that's everything. That's not one tank, right? The positive here for me is, not to try to play this down, is you would think if something was even more dangerous, they would have lowered it from 440 to 400 or 350. Common sense tells me that, right? They didn't move that number. And oh, by the way, we've been putting we have acetylene in our truck all the time, which is much, much more flammable than A2Ls are, right? Am I right or am I right? I mean, 9 out of every 10 cars today have an A2L refrigerant. It's called 1234YF. We don't think anything about it. But the auto industry has been doing that for 7 years. Why? Because they're used to putting gasoline in cars, and we don't think anything about it. You know, it was an easy move for them. So don't fear it at all right? So the other thing I wanted to tell you about, I showed that truck with tanks on the side. I heard a major manufacturer not long ago, I'm not gonna drop names, they said in their webinar about a month ago, it was really, really well, people went to it, well attended, if you will, but they stated that A2L tanks will not be able to lay on their side. It's true in some cases, it's not true in our product. And the reason is not that we're better than anybody else. You have to go and petition the DOT, and then they run you through all these hoops and make you do special testing because it's a little more flammable. And if you pass that test, they give you a special permit, which that's what I'm showing you there right now. That's our permit number. So that number, not that it means anything to you, will be stamped on our tanks to say that we've already been approved. It doesn't make our gas any better than anybody's gas, but it's important for me to tell you that that's not straight across the board that all A2L tanks can be laid on side. You have to do the homework and go do it. We've been working on this for 2 years behind the scenes, okay? Case closed on that. Tools must be rated. From moving forward, again, A2L tool review. In a lot of cases, not much is changing, as you probably already heard. Refrigerant recovery cylinders, as I said earlier, is going to be a red stripe on there, okay? Check with the manufacturer on vacuum pumps. Vacuum pumps I don't think are a big deal. They can be, but always check with the manufacturer. Just check with the manufacturer. They're better at this than any one of us. You know, they know what they know. We know what we know. Check. I've been pleasantly surprised going to all the manufacturer websites, finding out no one's ever come to my class, and I teach, I think last year alone, I've seen over 6,400 people in person training them, okay, across the nation. No one's ever come and said, hey, you were wrong about this, or emailed me and said they don't allow this. So don't take my word for it. Do your homework. Just Google the model number. Is it A2L ready? You're going to find out more than likely it is. Recovery machines move to A2L. The common theme here is A2L. Obviously, mercury or compound gauges, if they don't have the refrigerant on it, you're going to have to get new gauges. If you're into digital, you're going to load that up from the computer more than likely, okay? Take the latest data. If you're a Bluetooth person like I am, I love Bluetooth stuff. I've just always been that way. If you look at my phone, I got a zillion apps. I like easy things. I like to just make it go, and that's fast and easy, right? So when you go to the Bluetooth stuff, it's mostly on apps. Those apps are already updated. They're already out there. I know all the apps I work with. They already got the new refrigerants, and they have for some time. When it comes to hoses, I'm going to tell you to buy new ones, okay? That's just who I am. Whenever you change refrigerants, now you should change your gauges or your hoses, or at least purge them out, right? And again, I'm not trying to sell you anything. My hardest part when I started teaching A2Ls, when this was all really new 6 years ago, it was like a deer in the headlights. The presentation was like 15 minutes long, was fearing that I was going to have to go to people like my son or younger people who really concerned me that are just starting out in the industry, that are doing payroll deductions, and tell them they got to buy a new recovery machine or they got to buy something expensive. I don't like bringing that news to anybody. I live that world. It's a tough world to live in, right? So, but just so you know, make sure your hoses are A2L ready. A good practice would be to change the hoses at minimum on there, or at least run the purge. Go ahead. Yeah. So the reason for the adapter, I'll give you a little history on it, because I had trouble, and Chris knows this, wrapping my head around it. And I bring a different perspective as a contractor side, and I'm on the calls with engineers, marketing, salespeople, and I didn't like the idea. And then I started looking into it. So as Chris said, first of all, safety. Somebody comes up a tank, didn't take training like you did. It's usually the people that go to training that don't need training, okay? Go up there, they stop, say it won't fit, I don't want to get fired. You know, Chris told the story that I commonly tell. The other thing is here's the one that really made me understand it best. And even though as smart as sometimes I think I am or we think we are, it made total sense. It was more costly to try to have all these tool manufacturers go to left-hand threads and the OEMs to send the equipment over to left-handed threads, because they're still making the same component for A1 systems. They would have to retool everything. The least path of resistance was that little adapter. And oh, by the way, they use that in the auto industry and have for years. You know what I mean? It was just, once I understood that, it made common sense. You know what I mean? You got to buy this little adapter, you got to put it on there, and it's a safety net for other people. I got 10 minutes. Well, I'll tell you what, if I've only got 10 minutes, the takeaway from here is I was doing this presentation or similar to this last year with Dr. Chuck Allgood and Jason from, we had a panel discussion, and someone came up to me after, I'm not going to drop names, but they're here. Yeah, by the way, we sell A2L tools too. So it's starting to look like a NASCAR. But the takeaway there is everybody has A2L tools, okay? So whatever your favorite flavor is, just look into it, okay? All right, I'm going to open up to questions if there's questions out there. If there's not, I'll continue on. Anybody got a question for us? Any of us? Anything at all?
What was the app that has the line set measurement?
It's a good question. Let me show that to you after. Come over and see me at the booth, okay? Because I just found it like by Googling or something, or maybe I went to the app store. It didn't cost me anything, I know that. It was free, and I like free, so. Thanks for the question. Yeah.
Real quick, on the size of the room, the refrigerant charge,
Yeah.
look at a ductless system. Does that change anything?
Ooh, that's a good question. So the question was, on a ductless system, does that change anything? I don't think it does, but let me do some homework on that. I don't know, Wes. If you don't know, Wes is with ACA, really heavy into the instructional stuff in this education. I don't know the answer. Do you know the answer?
I do, and you just need to look at the size of the room. Just need to look at the size of the room and the charge, much like what you showed.
Okay.
But if I've got a bedroom and I've got a head hanging on the wall, I need to look at the charge and the size of the room.
Ah, wow.
Right.
That's cool. That's what I love coming here for, because every day I learn 2 or 3 things that I didn't know. Chris shared something with me yesterday that I wasn't aware of, that I've been not that I was ruining anybody's mechanical career, but it was about molecules, some things you don't get in the weeds about. But thank you, Wes. I appreciate it. Wes is a great guy. If you don't know that, he's really heavy into the ACA, very, very good educator and what have you, and has done some stuff already here. So anybody else? I saw another hand go up. Yeah.
What should we expect as far as any changes to refrigerant line sizes?
So, that's such a great question. My Lord, I crossed over that. Why did I cross over that? So when I showed the nail plate, it's hard to get all this into 45 minutes or whatever it is. So his question was line side changing. So if let's use 410A as the example, because it looks like most of the people in this at this event are air conditioning, comfort cooling people. When it comes to 410A and 454B, and I'm assuming R32, but I don't know for a fact, you're not changing the line size. Now, if it's an existing line set, and you can't go in the walls and see if there's nail or striker plates, back to that labeling stuff, you are required to pressure test that existing line in that home or that building, whatever's in the walls, and assure that that holds for 60 minutes and then document it. And thank you for bringing that up. There is no change in the line size setting. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I usually talk about that, and I didn't. The edit floor was hitting pretty good. I started with like 100 slides and like, God, what do I really want to say here? But thank you for that, yeah. Anybody else? Surely there's another question.
So when it comes to reusing line sets, is it recommended that you do not reuse a line set? You just replace it?
No,
A2Ls
not at all.
Doesn't
No,
matter?
not at all. The question was, when it comes to using line sets, is it recommended not to use? No, not at all. That's the beauty, because I struggle with this. In fact, the people that I was looking into a year ago with the codes, because it was so vague, and ESCO, I really thought they were going to stop taking my calls, because I wouldn't let it go. It's like, that's real world. How are you going to prove that you're not going to start tearing drywall up and prove there's not an A plate? And then they came back with, but the way it was written up, it was so vague. So the takeaway is here, yes, you can use your line sets. Now, if you change the system size and your manufacturer's manual says you now need this and not that, then obviously that's a no-brainer.
If you were working in a condo,
Yes.
okay, that is a completely buried line set. It has been there since the 80s. It is a 5/8 quarter-inch line set, and there's absolutely no access to it. It's going to be undersized no matter what. What is I mean, is it just an absolutely not, or is it just, hey, you're going to lose some capacity and some efficiency?
Anybody else want to answer that? You have to go with the correct line set. The takeaway. It doesn't matter what you're using. If you don't, you're going to change it. That's why on your spec sheets or your manuals, when you go beyond 75 foot, they tell you now I need a 7 to 8 instead of a 3/4. If I'm going vertical here, it might change, right? That's been the way it's been forever. So his question was, if there's something there that you only know is undersized and it's been there since the 80s, do I have to change it? Absolutely yes. And trust me, I've done a lot of retrofits on apartment complexes where the only reason we got the job is because we had a better mousetrap. And sometimes the mousetrap means having a contractor come in and build a header around a new line set through the apartment into the mechanical closet. Okay, but yes, absolutely have to. The manual is your resource, absolutely. So if the manual says I got to have 3/8 and 3/4, that's what you have to do. Okay. Let me see if I have anything else valuable. I think that's already it. This is something, if you care to know, this is a trifold you can find if you've got like a warehouse, if you're on the wholesale side. You can go to, just Google AHRI, A2L storage. That's all you need to put in there. This pretty little, and I mean that, it's all colored up, PDF will pop up to you to print out. That's all that is a PDF file, but it'll print out just like that. If you want to know how storage is what it's going to look like in your warehouses, in your contract, it says everything right there. I don't think it's actually been signed off on yet, Chris.
What's that?
The cylinder warehouse trifold.
Right. So the model codes IMC, UMC, and NFPA 1 for 2024, they've all adopted A2L refrigerants. So this is in effect there. But here's the rub on it, right? So Kentucky may not have accepted the 2024 versions of the NFPA 1. So it comes down to local jurisdiction of the fire marshal, right? He's going to have to be the one to sign off on it. If you guys have an issue about storage or warehousing any A2L refrigerants, you're going to need to stay local with that. Okay, just involve your fire marshal on those.
Yeah, so it's not stamped in law, state or federally, as Jeff said, and that's going to be, as Chris said, that's going to be kind of the common denominator because that's what people do now. It comes down to your local. If you're in a small community, a municipality like a town of 4,000 people, and there's no codes out there, it always comes down to your local jurisdiction, right? Everyone has to follow that. They have final say on that. If not, you have to get it documented and somehow get that override. Like when I ran a lot of dryer vents back in the years, anyone ever run dryer vents? In our codes, you can only be over so many feet, right? Because a lot of fires start with dryer vents, right? And if you put an elbow in there, that adds, right? That's part of our system, right? I would have to, on the rough end, they would approve it. On the final, you had to have the manual of that Maytag dryer, whatever, showing that they'll allow you to go 100 foot, and then they would accept it and give you your sticker and sign off. Anybody ever have to deal with that? It's very common in building codes, very common. So you can supersede it. There are exceptions to supersede mechanical codes, but you have to get some documentation, prove it right there, okay? All right, well listen, Chris, it's been great. Thanks for showing up.
Thanks,
I know
guys.
it's not the most exciting thing to talk about, but I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. If you're willing, give this video a thumbs up and drop us a comment. Don't forget to hit that bell icon to stay updated with all of our future videos. And as a quick reminder, HVAC School isn't just a YouTube channel. Dive deeper with us at our main website, hvacrschool.com. Curious for more knowledge on the go? We've got you covered. Tune into the HVAC School podcast, available on all your favorite podcast apps. And while you're at it, join our thriving Facebook group. Also, don't miss out on our free mobile applications available for both iPhone and Android. We're all about community. For techs, by techs.